Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Survival Tips for Parents Raising Anxious Kids. My name is Natasha Daniels. I'm an anxiety and OCD therapist, and this series is made in collaboration with Made of Millions Foundation. Today, I want to talk to you about exposure ladders or challenge hierarchies or challenge ladders. You can call them whatever you want, but developing challenges for our kids with anxiety is so important in helping them move through their anxiety. And it's a lifelong skill that they'll not only use now with their current fears, but it's something that they can learn to use throughout their life when they're facing challenges and they're facing anxiety. It's something I do with my own self and my own social anxiety. Every time I am faced with another anxious thought or another anxious challenge, I am aware of what steps do I need to take to challenge myself, what steps do I need to take to move into discomfort to make some progress and not let my anxiety pull me back. So whenever I'm teaching kids in my practice, I always say, I'm not just teaching you how to handle your anxiety or how to crush your anxiety right now. I'm training you on how to live a life where when your anxiety does pop up, because it will, you will know intuitively how to handle it. You will know how to challenge yourself. So challenges in and of themselves is really key in helping a child with anxiety grow into adulthood, learning those skills to adapt and be resilient. So let's talk about what it is. One of the best things that we can teach our kids is how to sit with discomfort. And that is really, really important when we're talking about anxiety or OCD, is how to sit with discomfort, how to sit with doubt, and to not go back to that comfort zone of avoidance, because anxiety loves avoidance. That's where it lives. And when we foster avoidance inadvertently, or we encourage avoidance by not rocking the boat with our kids, we are not letting them develop those muscles to tolerate discomfort, to tolerate the unknown. And that's really what challenges are about. They are about helping our kids look at situations from a different perspective and moving towards those things that make them scared instead of away from them or avoiding them. Because the knee-jerk reaction with anyone with anxiety, myself included, is to avoid. Avoiding sounds so much better. It feels so much better in the moment, but long-term it does a lot of damage because it doesn't strengthen those muscles of, doing awkward things and coming across and getting through to the other side. And it also is the easy way out. So anxiety loves that, and it grows when we do that, and it gives us more anxiety. So when we teach our kids to avoid, or we foster avoidance inadvertently, the anxiety typically grows over time and gets more debilitating. So learning the concept of challenges, incorporating it into your household is so important for your child's long-term success. So let's talk about what challenges are. So in a nutshell, challenges is when we teach our kids to move towards their fears instead of away from them. These can be really small little steps. They don't have to be big. And I think that's what parents sometimes get hung up on, is they think, my child is not willing to work on their anxiety, and they don't even want me to talk about their anxiety, so there's no way they're going to take a challenge. And sometimes it's because we're offering too big of a challenge and we're not breaking it down into small bite-sized pieces. The other thing is, I have yet to work with a child who is intrinsically motivated to work on their anxiety. They really need reinforcements. So gamifying it, adding prizes or positive reinforcement is super key in developing challenges. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about this in a bigger, broader perspective before we get into the details of it. Challenges in themselves is a way that we want our kids to think. We want them to think critically. We want them to look at a situation and say, I have more choices than just avoid or do it. I can do something in between. So if I'm afraid to go to a party, I guess that's not happening right now, but if I was afraid to go to a party, I don't have to go there and be a social butterfly. Maybe I can go there with my mom and sit there. That's better than avoiding the party altogether. Or if I'm afraid to go to sleep at night and I want my mom to lay in my bed with me, maybe her being in the door frame is better and it's more of a challenge than her disappearing completely or sleeping with me completely. And so we're trying to look at the middle ground of what small step can I make as a kid that moves me towards discomfort, that moves me towards my fears, that I can tolerate and feel empowered, but I am out of my comfort zone. That's what a challenge is. So the first thing you want to do in a perfect world is sit down with your child, partner with them. I always tell parents, this is not your journey. You're a coach, but the person in the driver's seat is your child. And so you cannot do challenges, you cannot set up challenges if your child is not ready for them. So you really want to go back and review all the episodes I've done prior to this that build up the skills to get to this point. This is the 9th episode out of a 10-episode series. And next episode, we'll be talking about how to maintain progress and wrapping it up. But all the other episodes prior to this one are about communication, teaching your child what anxiety is, putting your own anxiety in check, not accommodating. All of those episodes have built up to this episode, which is the meat and potatoes of how to help a child with anxiety. If your child's not ready for that, you have to go back to those earlier steps. And those earlier steps are about building the vocabulary and motivating them, teaching them what anxiety is and how it feeds off of their fear and their avoidance, and getting them educated and motivated enough to do what we're going to be talking about in this episode. Some kids are not ready for challenges for a long period of time. And that doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just means that they're not ready for this piece. It means you can pull back your accommodation. We did a whole episode on that. It means that you can work on education and communication. We did a whole episode on that. And there's plenty of work to be done with those things if your child's not ready to move into challenges. And a really good book that I'd recommend is Ellie Leibowitz's book on the space program. And I will leave a link below. And that's for kids who are treatment resistant and not wanting to or not able to work on their anxiety. There's still approaches that parents can take without their child's involvement. But today we're going to be talking about a child who is, maybe they're reluctant, but they are willing to possibly do challenges. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How do you work with your child who says, and you think they're not going to be completely giving you a big no, but they're not going to be maybe overzealous either. That's probably where most of our kids are at. So let's take a very simplistic problem so that I can walk you through what a challenge would look like. They're typically challenge ladders, and there's two parts. One, you can develop a challenge ladder. You have a very specific issue that you're trying to resolve. A child is afraid of shots, or you have a child who's afraid to go to bed at night, or you have a child who's afraid of throw up, or you have a child who's afraid of getting hurt, or you have a child who's afraid of separating, right? So you have a very concrete fear. And a lot of kids, most kids, actually have multiple themes. I call it the anxiety buffet, and they've got a couple of things on their plate. They have a main dish and side dishes. And so you want to look at which one you're going to target first. Now, sometimes people will target the smaller things first because they want to get traction and they want their child to have a quick win and feel a quick success. And there's no right or wrong in doing this. I always say, ask your child where they want to start. What fear do you want to work on first? Or what anxiety do you want to work on first, if you have many of them? Because we want your child's buy-in. We want them to feel in control. If we are doing too much of the work, they're going to take the passenger seat. They're going to not own this, and they're going to think that you're kind of dragging them through it, and it's not going to be as effective. Ultimately, we're trying to teach kids to do this for themselves. Ultimately, what I tell kids in my practice is, I'm coaching you and I'm modeling how to do this, but I want you to be doing this when you're 20. I want you to be doing this when you're 30. This isn't going to stop just because you get rid of this one problem. Anxiety does tend to come back, but the difference is you're going to have a lot of skills, and you're going to have an anxiety thing pop up, and you're going to be like, okay, what challenges do I need to do? Or I'm in a current situation, I need to take a challenge right now. So we want to foster that ownership early on by partnering with our child and letting them take the lead. So we would say to our child, let's make a list of some of the things that, your worry cloud, whatever you call it, your Mr. Worry, your Mr. Bossy, your dictator, tells you. What are some of the things that you worry about the most? And so make a list. And even if it's obvious, it's good to sit down and make a list with your child. So you have a list of things. You might only have one thing. It might be just separation anxiety. That might be it. And then you want to talk to them about what area do you want to focus on first. So if you have a million things on your buffet plate, then you might want to find out what area do you want to work on first. If you only have separation anxiety on your plate, then you really don't have to figure out what you want to work on first. We're going to take that theme, and then you might make, we're going to work on that, and we're going to make a challenge from that. So sometimes we have separation anxiety, and it looks like we have other things on our plate. If you have separation anxiety, then you also have sleep issues. Without a doubt, hands down, never met a kid who had separation anxiety who didn't have, at some point in their lives, a sleep issue as well. Because you separate when you sleep, unless they're in their parents' bedroom, and then that may not be an issue. But even then I've seen where it's still an issue if they're not like right up on their parent. So separation anxiety and sleep issues, those really aren't two separate themes. Those aren't two dishes. That's one main dish, if that makes sense. So figure out what you want to work on. And then you're going to say to your child, let's make a ladder on different things that we can do that are challenges. And you have to explain this to your child. A challenge is something that we're going to do that will kind of fight back your worry cloud, because your worry cloud's getting freaked out about being separated from me. And we have to train your worry cloud that it's okay for us to be apart. Now, I will say, as a total side note, separation anxiety happens to be one of the hardest anxiety themes to work with, because those kids tend to not be nearly as motivated on doing challenges as other issues, because they just are happy with being with their parent and they don't see a problem with that. So that issue tends to be a little bit harder to work on, not impossible at all, but you don't have a willing participant as much as you do with other anxieties. Just want to share that if you have a child with separation anxiety and you're like, oh my gosh, why doesn't she want to work on this? She's not alone. Most kids with separation anxiety don't want to work on their issues, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they can't work on it, or you can't gamify it. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute to help with that. So once we have the main theme, we're like, okay, we're going to be working with separation anxiety. We're going to just use that as an example for today because it's an easy one. But take any theme that you're dealing with at home and just replace separation anxiety, and it'll be pretty straightforward. So we have separation anxiety, and we're going to talk about how to build a challenge ladder in small increments and small steps to get our child to feel resilient and successful. Now, separate from that, we also will do challenges in the moment. And so there's really two different things happening here. One is it's kind of like we're going to the anxiety gym and we're building up our muscles. We are like setting up situations on purpose to build those muscles. And then separate from that, we're living a lifestyle, right? Let's just take the gym analogy right now. You're living a healthy lifestyle. So you might like eat well, or you might just walk around the neighborhood, or you might watch what you are doing. I don't know. But you're having a lifestyle that is promoting your good health. So with anxiety, it's the same thing. You're going to the anxiety gym and you're really purposely, working out and flexing that muscle. And you're also living the world of approaching anxiety in a challenging sort of way. So when things naturally pop up, then you would encourage your child to take a challenge. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about that at the end of this lesson, how you do that and how you incorporate that in your life. So you're doing two different things. You might get to a point, and this is kind of where I am at my house, where we don't really have a challenge ladder per se that we're always working on. Sometimes something will come up. A couple of months ago, my daughter developed just this intense fear of blood. She had to watch a video for school, and like within 24 hours, and it was more of an OCD issue, but she couldn't say the word blood, she couldn't see the word blood, she couldn't see an emoji with blood on it. Like it just ballooned out of control. She couldn't touch anyone because they have blood inside of them. It went more OCD-ish. But we created a challenge ladder in that moment, in that day, to deal with that issue. And within 48 hours, that issue was not there anymore because it was a small weed, and we were able to develop a challenge ladder really quickly. And because she's used to them, she started to make some progress very quickly, even though she was very hostile at the beginning. So that's a challenge ladder, and you don't do those. You're not going to be doing those your whole life, and you're not going to be doing those for a long period of time. You do those while you're trying to get some of those big issues resolved. And then you're living a life of just spontaneously offering challenges to your child as those things pop up. So we will wrap up talking about more spontaneous natural challenges and where you're going to create more of a natural setting in your house where you foster that on a daily basis. But let's talk about a challenge ladder hierarchy. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simplistic, really. But I always start with brainstorming with my child or the child in my practice. And I might say, we're going to sit down and we're going to just write down a bunch of different ways that we can bother your worry cloud. Now, some kids like different analogies. So I normally offer in my practice 2 different analogies. My kids they're like feisty kids, and so we like to crush the worry cloud or squish him, or clobber him. It's all very aggressive, but a lot of kids are like super kind. My kids are kind too, but they are worried about the worry cloud and they don't want to crush it. And so I move into the analogy of training your worry cloud. Your worry cloud needs some training. It's overzealous, it's overprotective, and we need to train it so that we can get to version 2.0. So I do talk about this in a different lesson as far as naming and personifying anxiety. But I do like both analogies depending on the child. So pick which analogy works best for your child and then use that language. So at my house, we might say, let's pick things that are going to really bother your worry cloud because he's bothering you all the time, so let's push him back. Or you might say, let's pick lessons that we can teach your worry cloud that aren't supposed to be really scary, but your worry cloud is having an overreactive response. And then you just write down, things that you come up with. I always like to preface it by saying, we're not necessarily going to do these things, so don't freak out. I'm going to pick some examples. They might really upset your worry cloud, but I don't want you to get nervous that you're going to have to do these things. We're just talking. I say that because I have learned in my practice by experience that kids start to get really panicky when you start to talk about these pretend scenarios. And so we want to be proactive and mitigate any panic response by letting them know that we're not doing these things, we're just talking, we're just brainstorming together. And then just come up with a list. So I would say things like, what number would you be, 1 to 10? I use a 1 to 10 scale. In my office, I also have a color scale that goes along with 1 to 10. And I also use faces. So you can get those on Pinterest or really anywhere where you can get like a feeling thermometer, or just tell them 1 to 10. Younger kids like colors. Kids on the spectrum sometimes would like faces or colors because sometimes kids can get lost in the numbers. And also I find kids with OCD, and we're not talking about OCD in this video, but just so that you know, numbers can kind of mess them up. They can get stuck on numbers, and so that can be an issue. So we do want a rating scale though. So I might say, what number would you be, 1 to 10? If I went around the block and you stayed home with your dad, what number would that be? What number would you be if I was in another room and you had to stay in another room of the house? What number would you be if I went into the backyard for 10 minutes and you stayed here? Or what number would you be if I was with my friend and you didn't know what time I was going to come back? What number would you be if you stayed at grandma's for 30 minutes and I was at home? So use all these scenarios, and I'm just giving you random ones just to give you an idea for separation anxiety. And then you rank them and you give them, you have different numbers, and you might put them in order depending on how organized you want to be. With a challenge ladder, you don't have to systematically go up the ladder anymore. Research has come out to say that it doesn't have to be this hierarchy. It could be a menu. It could be a menu that you choose depending on the child. So if the child's empowered and says, I'll take that one that makes me feel like an 8, and you haven't done the one that made her feel like a 4, that's okay. That's progress, and it doesn't matter. I don't want kids to get stuck doing things that are a 2 or a 3 because that's not going to move the dial. But if I have a kid who wants to do an 8 instead of a 5, I'm happy to let them do that. So the key is we want them to be successful. So if I see a child who's always doing an 8 or a 9 and then they're getting into a panic attack and they don't want to continue with it, that's a problem, because ultimately we want to see success. But even with my daughter, when we were doing that blood hierarchy, she went from not wanting to do it at all to wanting to do things that I thought were actually like too high, but I let her do them because she was just on a roll and she just plowed through them. So you have to know your child and know what they can tolerate, but we don't want to cocoon them if they're starting to feel that roll and that success. So then once you have this list, then you want to gamify it, and you'd say, this is very cool. This is how we're going to beat your worry cloud or train your worry cloud. And then you just say, let's come up with some reinforcers. And so create some sort of behavior modification system, which will look different for each one of you. In the beginning with challenges, I think that they have to have an A plus B equals C kind of model, which means I do this exposure, this challenge, and then I earn this. And so there needs to be an instant gratification to get the ball rolling. Over time, you can pull back and do points. And this is what we do at my house now, where they might get a point for an exposure. You can call it exposure or challenge, whatever your language is. And that point will add up to, they can cash it in. I actually use this app called Privilege Points. It's a chore app, but I really like it just because it's simplistic, and I can put the app on my kid's iPad and I have it on my iPad, and then I can create a store and I can put whatever points I want in there and say like 5 points equals this or 6 points equals that. And when I award them points, it shows up and it makes a little coin sound on their iPad. I like that because that's good Pavlovian response that I want, I hear the coins, I just earned some more points. So find what works for you and your family. In my practice, I had used tickets when I was seeing people in person. And I would give them a bag, a really cute little bag, and they would earn tickets every time they did exposures or challenges. So the key is you really want your child to see the benefit of their actions right in that moment. So if they're not getting an instant gratification kind of reward, they need to get a ticket or a point that they can visually see or touch so that it's hitting that reward center in their brain and they're seeing, wow, this is really exciting. This was a scary thing I did, but look, this feels good because I just got this. Eventually over time, it will be intrinsic. They'll see the benefit. The benefit is I don't have to be scared anymore, but people don't normally see that in the beginning. They need some encouragement. So I recommend trying to do one challenge per day. Sometimes with my kids, we do one challenge and it builds. And all of a sudden they're doing 3 or 4 or 5 challenges in one go. But a minimum of one challenge a day is good to get the ball rolling. In my practice, a lot of times I will just have kids do one challenge per day at the minimum. And that tends to keep the consistency because it's not about the intensity, it's about the consistency. So if I had a child who did some amazing things for one day but then never did anything else for the rest of the week, it'd be like going to the gym one day and then never going the rest of the week. It's not as good as maybe going every day but spending just 10 minutes a day doing it. Consistency is super key. So that's what we want to convey to our kids. We want to set up those challenges. And you can, create a chart and put it in their room or set a reminder so that you make sure that you do the challenges every day. And so challenges are not things that just pop up in the moment. They're things that you create, scenarios that you create, and that you do each day based on what you already agreed on with your child. So hopefully it's a very simplistic, quick snapshot view of what a challenge ladder will look like, but hopefully that gives you enough idea to get started. The other thing I want to mention before I wrap up this episode is how to move into a world where challenges are natural. So you might have your challenge ladder that you're working on, but then you might also have opportunities where your child is afraid to do something. This happens a lot at my house. This is pretty much where we live right now, where something random will happen. My child will just all of a sudden be nervous to go into their room because it's dark. And because we have been doing this for so long, my child might say to me, if I go in, can I get a point? And if I can really see fear in their face and I know they're not playing me, then I might say, yeah, you can get a point for that. Or my son who has OCD issues around food, he might say, could I get a point if I finish eating this because I don't really want to? And if I know that it's valid and genuine, I might say, yes, you can. Now, a lot of the times they're not asking for points. I am suggesting points. So I wanted someone to go get something in the garage and they were like, no, I don't want to. It's scary. It's dark in there. And then I would say, turn the light on and you can earn a point if you go do it. So a lot of times with my kids, because a lot of their fears are around safety and darkness and things like that, I can offer them points to go do things that they normally wouldn't do to face their fears. And I tell them, you have to do it slowly. I don't want you to run in there and then run back out because that really isn't conveying to your worry cloud that there's nothing to be scared of. It's like, whoo, I just dodged a bullet. I got it in there and I got out. That's not doing a challenge. A challenge is going in there and being like, I know that there's nothing to be afraid of. I'm going to use my red thoughts and green thoughts, and I'm going to tell myself that I'm safe, and I'm not going to run in there like I'm avoiding a killer. So we do challenges spontaneously throughout our days. And I use privilege points for that as well. And I just give that to them as needed. And that's how we live our life. And sometimes my kids will joke and they'll give me challenges too. They'll say, Mom, that was your social anxiety. We challenge you to go and talk to that woman, or go and do this, or wear that thing that you don't want to wear. And I will sometimes take their challenges to show them and model to them that everybody is working on their anxiety in this house, and that every human being, whether they're a grown-up or a child, have their own challenges every day or every week or every month to overcome. And then we're all doing that. We're all moving towards discomfort, and we're all moving towards our anxiety so that we can get through to the other side. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that this gives you some ideas on how to approach your own child's anxiety. If you want any further advice, please feel free to visit my website at atparentingsurvival.com. I also have an online school where I teach this stuff, and you can visit that at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. So I hope you find the sparkle in everything you do. I'll be back for the final episode in this series in 2 weeks. Take care.